All right, nightcappers, have you ever noticed how fast history just poof disappears? From the transatlantic slave trade to Ukraine's fight for survival. The story is the same. When memory is erased, freedom is the first casualty. Tonight, we are connecting the dots.
This is NightCap with Dr. Nola Haynes, streaming only on the Persist Network.
Hey, Nightcappers, welcome back. We are streaming only on the Persist Network. It's Tuesday, August 26, 2025. I'm your host, Dr. Nola Haynes, your favorite political scientist. Tonight, we're keeping it real, keeping it global, and keeping it cute. But don't get it twisted. The stakes are serious. So grab your glass, clink, 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 silence the group chat, and let's get into this late night convo. This is NightCap. And if you're catching us on YouTube, hit subscribe and ring that bell. Cheers. All right, y'all. So it's time for the People's Brief. You know how I like to break down a few things that are happening in the news cycle, which is 5,000 gajillion, trillion things. But as I mentioned tonight, we are connecting the dots. So two things happened last week that mean a great deal to me for very similar reasons. So it kind of went largely unnoticed, but on August 23rd, it was the International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its abolition, which was designated by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization to mark the uprising specifically in Haiti that sparked the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. And now with everything going on in the news with that little lady, the little fitness lady, and looking at Nicole Hannah-Jones's response, Reese Colbert's response, so many other people chimed in about, what's her name? Jillian's comments on Abby Phillips' show. And, what upsets me about this is it's not the fact that slavery was a topic of conversation, because in my personal opinion, we should always remember how this country was formed. But it was the fact that it was someone who was trying to offer an alternative perspective to take away from the level of importance and stealing its historical place. That person got all of the attention. That's what irritated me the most. So we're going to dig a little deeper into that. And then also last week, that went largely unnoticed, August 24th, it was when Ukraine gained its independence, Ukraine gained its independence August 24th, 1991. The Declaration of Independence followed the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that's when they declared their independence. And this was later confirmed by a popular referendum. And then there are subsequent things that happened. You've heard me talk about the 1997 Budapest Agreement, which is part of Ukraine gaining its independence, and then countries like Russia recognizing Ukraine's sovereignty. So why are both of these moments important? Why am I connecting these dots? Both moments show how fragile freedom can be. The slave trade reminds us of freedom stolen and then reclaimed. Ukraine reminds us freedom can still be attacked. And as I sit here in occupied light DC, many people are wondering what is going to happen to our freedoms, to our rights, as many people are finally waking up to the reality that the current president is an authoritarian, moving into totalitarian space every single day, marching closer and closer and closer to a militarized country. More on that. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll come back to that story. But erasure, whether of Black history or Ukrainian sovereignty, is a tactic of oppression. Memory is resistance, and remembering is part of our survival. So, speaking of survival and resilience, let's turn to our guest tonight, someone who knows what it means to wrestle with truth, faith, and community in a shifting world. We'll be right back.
NightCap is powered by Persist. Want more smart, unbothered commentary where politics meets culture? Subscribe to Persist, Substack, and YouTube, and never miss the tea.
All right, everyone, welcome back. We had to do that quick ad break so you all will know where to go to subscribe and ring that bell, ding, 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 so you'll be notified tonight of all the different things that we have coming up with the Persist Network and also with NightCap. But let's get into this. I'm so excited. I just want to give a shout out to someone who I am developing a friendship with. There are so many amazing women in the Persist Network, and Malynda Hale definitely fits that description. She is the new executive director of the new Evangelicals. She's an award-winning singer, activist, actress, writer, and creator of one of my favorite Substacks, We Need to Talk. # We Need to Talk. She sparks honest conversation about faith, justice, and community. And what I love is that she did NightCap when we were on IG Live. So she was there suffering with us through all of our tech problems. And this is her second time on the show. And we are going to have a very special moment together. We talked about slavery in the opening of tonight's show. And I felt it important to show about a 3-minute clip of the creator of 1619, Nicole Hannah Jones's response to, I'm not trying to be rude or trying to be funny. I genuinely don't know Jillian's last name. To her comments on Abby Phillips' show on CNN. And we're going to watch this together, and then we're going to come back on the other side and offer a few comments.
I usually do these videos, but as a creator of the 1619 Project and someone who has studied the history of slavery for 3 decades, I could not let that viral CNN clip of Jillian Michaels stand. I have to first state that the times are far too serious and dangerous for us to lend our platforms to harmful nonsense. It's simply irresponsible, with everything that's happening in this country, to have someone as credentialless as Jillian Michaels on a major network show legitimizing the erasure of our history. Now, I know there have been some viral efforts to debunk her claim that somehow slavery was a side institution in the United States because less than 2% of white people owned slaves. But even those efforts, while valiant, by embracing this right-wing framing, they still aren't really getting to it. You see, this is how numbers and data, though technically true, can also be lies. And this is why we can't let bad faith actors set the parameters of the debate or of our collective understanding. So please bear with me because this is a lot. Let's take the fewer than 2% of white people own slaves at face value, though we know that number is technically incorrect. And let's apply that standard to any other industry. What percentage of Americans own social media companies or technology companies such as Apple? It's a tiny percentage. I'm doubtful if it's even 1% of Americans. And yet no one would credibly argue that social media companies are not ubiquitous across American life, that they don't play a major influence on our political, social, and economic life in America. And in fact, what we know is that more than 70% of Americans use social media, though hardly any Americans own social media platform. There's a reason that the heads of Meta, Apple, and Amazon, Google, and X all took part in Trump's inauguration festivities, with several of them standing on the actual dais during Trump's inauguration. These men also happen to be amongst the wealthiest in the world and demonstrate how a small cadre of super wealthy men can have an outsized impact on American politics and culture. This is just critical thinking, y'all. So if we want to play the numbers game, the much more important measure is what percentage of Americans own slaves? No, but what percentage of those empowered did? So here we go. Before 1865, the end of slavery in the United States, 63% of U.S. presidents have been slave owners at some point in their lives. More than 1,800 members of Congress owned slaves, meaning between 1789 and 1819, more than half of the men elected to Congress each session were slave owners. What about the Supreme Court? 26 of this nation's first 30 Supreme Court justices were enslavers, and about half of all the Supreme Court justices before the Civil War were enslavers. So many Supreme Court justices were enslavers that if we added up all the Supreme Court justices coming all the way to this present court, 1 out of 4 of all Supreme Court justices in this nation's history were enslavers. I mean, let's just look at our money. All but one of the people on our cash currency engaged in African slavery.
All right, so
Look
let's get into
$1.
let's get into this. I could have listened to the whole thing, but we only have a limited amount of time, and I want to make sure we get into all the things. So first and foremost, welcome back, sis. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Tonight. Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to be in conversation with you, so I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so that I love this counter argument.
I do too.
Because Jillian Michaels, I genuinely forgot her last name. I'm not trying to. I am being a little petty, but I genuinely forgot her last name. I didn't watch that show that made fun of, obese people, so I'm not that familiar with her. Yeah. But, like I said at the beginning of the show, this really angered me, Malynda, because she was getting all of the attention. One thing about MAGA folks, they know how to be loud and wrong. And, truth is often a little bit more quiet, yes, than being loud and wrong. And so she got all of the attention, all of the media. And I feel like this was such an appropriate analysis of why focusing just on 2% is misleading, is misinformation that can also lead to disinformation, right? So what were your first thoughts hearing Nicole's analysis?
Well, there are a couple of things. I think one of the crucial things that we aren't talking about when it comes to that 2% number is that Jillian was trying to paint it as some morality issue for people not owning slaves. It was an economic thing. They couldn't afford to own slaves. So if you want to think that 98% of white people, if they just didn't own slaves because they didn't think it was right, no, it's because they couldn't afford to. That's why. So I think that she and so for her to say there were more good people than bad people, then why did it go on for 400 years? If there were that many more good people, that you're already putting a hole in your argument, because it wouldn't have gone on for that long. And they had to go to war for it to end. So she's missing some pretty big context when she's making that statement. But what I do love about the analogy that Nicole used with the social media, it's very relatable. And it's also very similar to an analogy I use, because I've had these conversations a lot with white people wanting to know, like, why do Black people immediately not trust white people? And I said, it has nothing to do with your skin color. It's about history. And it's the same likening to a woman maybe that has a history of abuse with men. She doesn't trust men initially. And so I think that when you have to use analogies like that, unfortunately, when it comes to Black people, because when we're the initial scenario, people already turn off. They already turn off and they already have their blinders on. And so that's why I really appreciated that social media analogy, because we all know Facebook, Meta, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, any social media platform. Look at how Substack has blown up. It is completely infiltrating our society and our culture. And it's shifting how we communicate with each other. It's shifting how we view things. It's how we get our news information. But there's only a few tech bros out there that are making the billions in owning those companies. So I thought it was spot on. It was a perfect analogy.
I completely agree. And it also reminds me of where I'm from in New Orleans. And I'm very curious if that 2% also included people who own domestic slaves. Like, I wonder if that 2% was agricultural, because you can't really grow anything on the bayou, right? So a lot of the slaves in New Orleans and certain parts of Louisiana, they were domestic slaves. And not just in New Orleans and some parts of Louisiana, but all over the country, even in those states that were more friendly towards abolitionists. There were tons of domestic slaves. So that was one of the things that I was very curious about. But yes, you bring up a good point about how, such a small amount of owners of social media platforms saturate the entire social media ecosystem. And then I really, really love that analogy. And to your point, it's exhausting having to come up with intellectual exercises to explain and prove our existence in righteous rage and anger.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a pin in that because I could go on and on and on and on and on about that. Don't let me start quoting James Baldwin. Guys.
I'm with you, sis. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Uh, but we're going to transition a little bit because I want the folks to hear about you. I want them to hear about your new adventure, being the new executive director of the new Evangelicals. And
Yeah.
I want you to explain what that is and why it's important.
Yeah, so the New Evangelicals is a nonprofit organization that is specifically seeking to reject Christian nationalism and empower people to reclaim their faith. And so we're really fighting what the current administration is doing from a faith-based, justice-centered perspective. Because if you've noticed, Christian nationalism is something that has really come to the forefront lately. And what we need is for progressive Christians. I don't even like saying progressive Christians because I think that Jesus was progressive. So that's just the real Christianity.
Yes, he was. Don't get me started there either.
That's another conversation. But for the purposes of this conversation, we'll say progressive Christians to really come to the forefront, reclaim that faith, and show people what a better way forward is, and how people are using Christian nationalism to control women, to control policy, to control laws, to infiltrate their religious freedom, but it's really just for their version of Christianity. So I'm really honored that I get to lead this movement and lead this organization for a few reasons. One, a lot of the people that found TNE came from the deconstruction space, which is people that left conservative Christianity, started to ask questions, and then realized everything that they had learned was wrong. So they're, healing from religious trauma. I never went through that. I grew up a progressive Christian. I grew up very liberal. So I have always been very Jesus centered in everything that I do. And it's really beautiful to be in this position, not just as a progressive Christian, but as a Black woman, because I think our approach to justice and equity and equality and all of those things is very different, because we kind of approach things from an observer lens. When you are the demographic that is historically left out of conversations, and you are kind of always looking in from the outside, you have a different perspective and a different view than most people do. And so combining those experiences in my life, not coming from a place of trauma, not coming from a place of spiritual abuse, coming from a place of love and empathy, and really just Jesus centered. My faith informs everything that I do. We're really trying to fight what is happening in this country right now, because despite what people think, America is not a Christian nation. You are supposed to be able to practice whatever religion you want and practice it freely. And they are trying to change that with posting the 10 Commandments in classrooms, with requiring Bible classes in public schools. I am a Christian, but I have never wanted to force my beliefs onto anybody. I'm a Christian because it works for me. If being a Buddhist works for you, great. If being Jewish works for you, great. Whatever the case may be, just be a good person. Just act with kindness and love. And so that's what we're really trying to push, and we're trying to build this community and build a way forward and show people this is the way, and this is how Christians are supposed to be. So I'm really excited about the work that we're doing.
I love it. I have a comment and then I have a follow-up question. So
Yeah.
a lot of nightcappers may not know, because this isn't something that I talk about a great deal, because I personally believe that, your faith is your business. I'm on the side of the debate of, should religion and faith be in a public sphere or the private sphere? I'm definitely private sphere. Your
Yeah.
faith is your business, right? But,
Yeah.
if you know anything about me, you can read on my bio, what is that Masters of Divinity? What does that mean? So when I was an assistant chaplain, when I was at the Divinity School of an Interfaith Center at Suffolk University, this was actually right after the Boston bombings. And I will never forget young Muslim girls contemplating if they should take public transportation to campus wearing their hijab. I remember having to console and counsel young college kids from every single denomination. I'm something that's called born into Catholic. I'm Catholic. I was raised Roman Catholic, but pivoted definitely more towards Jesuit understandings of Catholicism as as I got older. And
Mhm.
so there's a level of trauma that I absolutely understand with being a Catholic that's more rooted in how the institution handled things like children being molested. So I understand that trauma, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I understand how important it is, how even more important faith becomes when you are traumatized. So I am so happy that you all are doing this work. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that you leaned into the interfaith lens and the foundationing of this country.
Mhm.
It burns my soul to see the way in which um, religion and politics are commingling in such an obscene way.
Yeah.
Things that the Secretary of Defense has said has
Mhm.
no place in politics and running an institution like the Department of Defense, which they actually want to change the name. I heard on the streets to Department of War. Anyway,
Yep.
but I can let me stop rambling. Here's my question. For some people, especially non-Christians or Christians that are different types of Christians from Protestants,
Mhm.
Baptists specifically, this word evangelical can come with a negative connotation. Can
Absolutely.
you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has a negative connotation when you look and see what evangelicals have done historically, and what it's meant, and how they use their theology to weaponize and cause harm. And I think the reason that Tim Whitaker, who's the founder of New Evangelicals, named it that is because he wants to reclaim it and change it and make it about something good. I mean, I'm all about reclaiming things and changing them and making them for good. And again, I don't believe there should be a correlation between faith and politics. But I will say, if you're going to use your religion to be what guides you in your politics, why wouldn't you use it for good? And that's what I've never understood about
Mm,
so many people in this administration that claim to be a Christian, that are supposed to know what Jesus did. Like, read the red words. The man went out and helped people and loved
mm,
people and was
mm,
trying to teach people how, there was so much moral clarity in all that he did. And to see what has been happening with people who call themselves evangelicals, who call themselves Christians, we're trying to reclaim that. We're trying to reclaim that faith, reclaim that word, and show, no, that's not what being a Christian is. This is what being a Christian is. This is what following Jesus is. And so I think it's very easy to walk away, and I don't blame people that have. I don't blame them whatsoever, and I would never try to bring them back when they've been harmed. But I'm stubborn, and I'm not going to let them take that label away from me and continue to turn it into something bad. So I'm going to fight till the end if I have to, just to
mhm.
reclaim that and show, no, this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we're supposed to show up.
Exactly, because Christians are supposed to evangelicalize, right? And that is what Christians are supposed to do. They're supposed to go out and spread the good news, the gospel. Um, but, it's been weaponized in such a way that one group of a particular type of Christianity has co opted it to make it seem something, um, first of all, that only white folks can participate in. So
1000.
that's right? Like that's another part of it. And what I like is that you use that word reclaim. I think that is very important. And as a political scientist, church and state, there a couple years ago, because there's been slow marching up to where we are right now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There was a policy, I can't remember it, and I wish I would have thought about it before the show because we could have brought it up and I could have spoke more in depth about it. There was a policy or a law, something happened to where church and state got mangled, or the separation, something happened. I'm going to do my research, do a deeper dive there, because all of this did not just happen overnight,
No,
right?
not at all.
And
Yeah.
we can go all the way back to the 60s and the 50s and each decade to explain how we got here. But I'm really happy that you are doing this work. I think it's very important. And kudos to the organization for trusting and believing in a Black woman to run this organization in a time where we are being targeted, in a time where we are not being supported, in a time where we are losing jobs left, right, and center, and people are not hiring us. So honestly, just that in and of itself, I'm gonna rock with the new evangelicals.
I love it. I love it.
But I want to transition into one of the things that we talked about this before. I love how you write and how you communicate. You have this beautiful, nuanced, people first way of communicating where you're really trying to understand things. Like the other night on Threads, you had asked my good folks a question. I'm like, girl, but you are the person to do it.
So you were like, I'm not me, couldn't be me. That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
I just had I had a phone call with a friend earlier about this, but let's talk about your kind of humanity first approach. And then also kind of like, let's segue into we need to talk because the two are definitely linked. So let's talk about this human first approach.
I mean, I just think it's so easy to lose your humanity in a divided world, right? It's easy to get angry. It's easy to fight. You got two thumbs and a phone, like you can say whatever you want, and there may not really ever be a consequence for anybody, right? I just think that when you start to become the thing that you're fighting against, then you lose all credibility. And I've made a personal vow that I just want to put people first. And even the tagline for my Substack, We Need to Talk, it's everything begins with a conversation. Everything.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it could be something as simple as what are we going to have for dinner? Well, let's talk about it, right? Or it's how are we going to change the world? Let's have a conversation about it. And so I've always viewed humans as deeply complex and simple at the same time. I think when I say simple, it's, we all want love. We all want to be able to provide for ourselves, for our families. We all want to be able to afford things. We all want friendship and companionship. I think these are basic things that humans all want. And I think if we can start there, then we can start expanding the thread of okay, well, we may not agree on how to get to certain things, but what do we agree on? And so I'm always willing to ask MAGA questions because I do want to understand their psyche. I do want to understand how they got to where they are. Now, again, I will say there are some people that are just blatantly racist. And there's nothing that I could do to ever reach them or get them to change their perspective of me. I'm not worried about them. But there are people that I've noticed in conversations that I've had that are Trump voters that claim to be MAGA. When you really, pull back the veil, you're like, oh, you just really thought this was the best option for you based on the information that was given to you. And I think people also don't understand, going back to that social media conversation, that analogy, how much is controlled, how much we see is controlled. And that's why I'm so pro conversation, so pro face to face, so pro get off of social media and talk to people, have a Zoom, have a FaceTime, whatever, because you will discover things that you don't see on social media whatsoever. I said this the other day. I said, I watch Fox News all the time. I watch it all the time because I want to know what they're seeing. And I'm here to tell you. They are not seeing what we see.
Oh no, they're not. 1000%. I
They're
used
not
to go to
seeing.
the VA. I used to go to the VA all the time with my mama, and they have Fox News on all the time. I'm like,
They don't
I
know.
they don't know.
Keep them in the dark. And it's purposeful. It's purposeful. So I do try to extend grace in that way, that I'm like, oh, you're being kept from information on purpose. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk. What do you think you know? type situation. And I've been successful a few times. I've been very unsuccessful more times than I care to admit. But I'm the type of person that will always try. And I think at the end of the day, I just want to push anybody to be the best version of themselves and learn to communicate and remember that we are all humans and life is just really hard for everybody and you never know what other people are going through. And so I really do try to approach every conversation I have in that way. I have snapped back before because again, I'm still human, but
Mhm.
I try my best to approach every conversation with grace. I do.
I love that so much. And, as much as I'm kidding around, in my work, I literally have to talk to everyone. And it depends on which me is showing up that day. Um, is it the former assistant chaplain? Is it the security professional that looks at things very cold and analytical? Is it the
Mhm.
professor who has to deal with everybody and their mama? It depends on who's showing up that day,
No.
And I hope that my faith leads first. I hope.
But I get it. Trust me. Trust me.
Like,
Yes.
okay, Jesus, what we gonna do right now in this moment? But what I love about this conversation is your willingness to always talk to people. And I talk to the most people, believe it or not, in the airport. You run
Mm.
into everybody and their mama at the airport. And I've had the most fascinating conversations with MAGA folks, but then they will always pivot and somehow justify their very harmful things that they believe in. And that's when that person who might align with DL Hughley's point of view about this shows up. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, okay, so you did vote intentionally knowing this would harm other people, because I was sitting here trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, but here you go. You know what I mean? So I can talk to you all day long. I am getting messages from my team like, wrap it up, wrap it up. We have got to come back on. We have got to finish this conversation. But
Yes.
before you go, tell everybody how they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. So Instagram and Threads is just at Malynda Hale, and my Substack is melindaHale.substack.com, or you can just do hashtag we need to talk and it will show up. Please subscribe. I write a lot about the heart and humanity and all of those things. So if you're into having deep conversations and critical thinking, please subscribe to my Substack.
Yes, subscribe to that We Need to Talk Substack. Thank you, sis. I will see you
Play
again.
Faith in 5.
Thank you.
Okay.
Play Faith in 5. Play
What?
Faith in 5, Nola.
Faith in 5?
Yeah, the game. The C block.
Oh my gosh, I completely forgot. I thought you were telling me to wrap up the whole show.
No, we
I didn't
said
know
move
what
on
you
to
were
C
saying.
block.
Okay,
We're keeping
wait
this
a minute.
in. Move on to C
Okay.
block. We're keeping
All
this
right,
in.
Linda. Okay, my bad. All right. So one of the things that we do on the show is we like to curate games for different people. And
Okay.
so the game that we curated for you is called Faith in 5.
Okay.
And it's a little rapid fire, Faith in 5. We ask 5 questions and then you give 5 quick answers, whatever comes to you.
Oh no. Oh no.
I played this with Suzanne Lab, girl. We had a good old time. Suzanne.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm worried. There's not like Bible questions because I'm not a Bible head. Please don't.
It's not theology class, I promise.
Okay, good. Because I will fail. And I went to Christian college and I did not like Bible class. So please, okay, let's lay it on me.
No Bible verses. All right. Question number 1. One word to describe the current state of American Christianity.
I can't say one word, but I'm gonna say 2. Hot mess.
Great answer. Number 2. A hymn, gospel, or worship song that never leaves your playlist.
His Eyes on the Sparrow.
Number 3. If Jesus had a Substack, what would the title be?
I didn't say that.
I am hollering. Wait a minute. Okay, wait. Okay, number 4. Okay, wait a minute. This is kind of a Bible question, but not really. You'll know the answer. Which biblical figure would thrive on TikTok today and why?
Okay, I have. Okay, I'm gonna say Mary Magdalene.
Ooh, Mary was a little spicy. She wasn't as spicy as they made her out to be, but yeah, she was a little spicy.
She would
Not
have
Mary
some things to
Magdalene.
say, though. I think she would have some things to say.
She would have a few things to say, like lies,
Right.
lies, lies. All right. Number 5. Finish the sentence. The future of faith is.
Hopeful.
Oh, that is such a beautiful, beautiful way. That is wonderful. That I enjoy playing that. Thank you so much for my team reminding me in the background to play Faith in 5. That was amazing. And I'm going to say goodbye again. Is it safe to say goodbye now? Like that was wonderful. And I love being to be able to be so free, to have this platform, to laugh, to talk about serious things, and just to like be. When recently I did an interview with my really good friend Joe Rubin on the Siren Network on his podcast, on his live stream podcast. And one of the things that we were talking about was this new media ecosystem. And so we both have national media experience. We were both surrogates. We were both in the same kind of national security spaces where we had to go out and message and, do all these things. And being in this space, this new media space, being on the Persist Network, being connected to so many amazing women, my executive producer, Hannah, is definitely one of those top tier people for me. Meeting people like Malynda, it has been one of the most amazing gifts since we all kind of woke up in November 2024 to a reality that many of us did not want to face. But the community, the sisterhood that is coming out of this is something that will resonate with me for the rest of my life. I just kind of wanted to say that really quick before I give my sign off. So I want to connect all the dots here. Nicole Hannah-Jones gave this wonderful analysis about how that 2% matters, right? That the percentage in a current context, the percentage of social media owners, maybe we can count on both hands, maybe like 1.5 hands, how they have so much power, not just here in the United States, but around the world. So to distill slavery down to just 2% without telling the complete story is egregious, is dangerous, and is an attempt to erase the importance of those 400 years. But what I want to focus on, I kind of want to pick up where Nicole left. So we talk a lot about 400 years. I remember one of the staples as I was growing up in my head was Spike Lee's 40 Acres and a Mule. Now, that actually wasn't about slavery. It was what happened after slavery, Reconstruction. I'm going to focus on the era of post-Reconstruction because Reconstruction was only, a decade? Let's talk about Jim Crow. Jim Crow era lasted from the late 19th century, specifically 1877, is where we can mark post-Reconstruction. Why? Because federal troops were withdrawn from the South. Do you want to know how long this lasted? Do you want to know how long this remnant of chattel slavery lasted? Up until the 1960s, where the Voting Rights Act package was passed. So, 1877 up until the 1960s. However, ironically, we are told to move on from our history. We are told to move on from slavery. We are told that the African American Smithsonian Museum is too woke, which we all know is coded for too Black and too truthful. You want to know how long the Civil War lasted? From 1861 to 1865. But I am not trivializing the Civil War. The point I am making is you want us to move on from 400 plus Jim Crow years that ended when my mama was a preteen. My mother, not my great grandmother, not my great 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 grandmother. But you want the country to celebrate Confederate history, a moment that is forever memorialized in history as lasting 4 years. The math isn't mathing, okay? I just want to point that hypocrisy out. Tonight, we remember two truths: that freedom is never just given, it is fought for, and that erasing history is one of the fastest ways to weaken a people. Whether we're talking about the abolition of the slave trade or the fight for Ukraine's independence, the story is the same. Memory is resistance, and freedom is sacred. I have absolutely no faith that the current president will be able to broker any sort of peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. Vladimir Putin is not interested in that. He is interested in conquering territory he believes is his. He is a child of the former USSR, the Soviet Union. He wants to see those territories reclaimed, not in a positive way in which we heard Malynda talking about reclamation, but in a way that disenfranchises, that kills, that terrorizes, that demeans and erases. In those ways, this is why and how the remembrance of the slave trade and Ukraine's independence align. When you are fighting for freedom, you are fighting for us all. And as Malynda reminded us, faith has always been one of the ways we make sense of that struggle, whether in pews, on the streets, or on Substack. The question for all of us is, how do we hold on to truth? And how do we build bridges of belief that move us forward together? All right, y'all. This has been a very powerful and engaging episode of NightCap. I hope you all enjoyed what we offered this evening as I sip my little juice and tell y'all to see you in the comments. And if this was valuable to you, leave us a comment or a like on the Persist Substack, YouTube, share with a friend, tell a friend to watch. We need you to keep producing the type of show that you want to see. All right, y'all. See you in the comments.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Persist on Substack, YouTube, and Instagram.